Hey guys, it's Sasha. On Sunday, the Sunday Times published an interview with T.S. Anil, the new CEO of Monzo, and shortly after a bunch of other publications published their own articles referencing that one. Now, all of these were extremely positive, and people were saying really great things about what he had to say, but the problem for me was that nobody actually looked at the numbers. Nobody actually went and broke down what was said or what that might mean in terms of financials, and I thought that was somewhat disappointing from what I thought was, respectable publication with journalists who should maybe, in my opinion, do a little bit more digging before publishing what kind of reads a little bit more like marketing material. But don't worry, I went and did it, and here is the verdict. It looks incredibly bleak for Monzo based on the numbers that I'm going to walk you through, but let me break down exactly why and all the background, all the data that is making me think this way. Let's start with the big number that everyone has been quoting. T.S. Anil said in the interview that they now have 135,000 paying subscribers. This is people who have the Monzo Plus or the Monzo Premium cards. That sounds great, right? A big number with lots of zeros. It has many thousands of paying customers. That must be doing really, really well. Well, let's look at the numbers really simply. The Plus account costs £5 per month, and the Premium Metal card is £15 per month. So these 135,000 paying accounts will earn anywhere between £8.1 million per year and £24.3 million per year, depending on the distribution between those two accounts. Now, given the price of the Metal card is quite a lot, and I'm guessing not everyone wants one, I would guess that it's maybe on the lower end of the scale, but I have no idea. So let's just talk about the range. Now, let's assume that these products are insanely profitable. I'm talking crazy profitable, way more profitable than any normal financial services product is. Let's go with a 50% margin, just to be on the conservative side, just so that people don't point out that maybe I slightly under-egged it. Let's go completely over the top, and my expectation would be that it is far less than that, but let's just assume 50%. So if we go with that, these accounts make up about £4 to £12 million in extra profit for the company per year, even if the margin is this high. The last accounts that Monzo published in June 2020 that go up to February 2020 show that the company made a loss of £114.7 million for the year, that's after tax, and that went up considerably from, I think it was 47.1 million the previous year. Now, as it stands, the money that these new paying accounts are going to be generating as a result of these two numbers are basically relatively insignificant in helping Monzo to break even, but it gets much worse than this. It gets much worse. Let me talk you through it. First, I went and looked at the dates when these products were launched. And any time when Monzo publicly confirmed or shared some numbers with some publication, and here, I think I got these right. Maybe I'm one day out on one of these days, but I think I'm pretty accurate. So first, the Plus account was launched on the 16th of July 2020. Then on the 18th of August, Out5 published an article where Monzo claimed to have 50,000 Plus account signups already just in the first month or so. That's really good, right? On the 20th of October, Monzo Premium was launched. So on the 2nd of December, Monzo shared numbers with TechCrunch, who said that they now have 100,000 paid accounts in total. And then on Sunday, the 14th of March, the article that I'm referencing in the Sunday Times, in that article, TSN said they now have 135,000 paid accounts. So I did the obvious thing and I went and plotted these on a graph. Now you can see over here that after the initial bump, you'll notice that the numbers have sort of like leveled to a straight line growth, and that's interesting. So we're not seeing any kind of explosive nature. We're not seeing people try it out and then tell their friends and then they're signing up and then it's sort of like self-perpetuate. We're also not seeing some massive early slowdown. So it looks like there's some adoption, but we're not seeing anything crazy. And here's the thing, the premium card has a 6-month minimum term, which is really important because it was launched at the end of October. So the bunch of people who got it early, we don't know how many that is, but a bunch of people who got it early, like maybe with the Plus account, there was a lot of people who got it early. They have until late April or early the following month in order to go and cancel that if they choose to do so. So at the moment, we haven't seen any of those people have the opportunity to actually drop out the numbers. But let's assume that none of that happens. Let's assume all the people who have got it are perfectly happy with it and nobody's leaving. And we're going to continue along exactly the same trajectory in the graph for the foreseeable future. That's probably unlikely because typically the early adoption is going to be highest among existing customers and then it's going to be less and less. So you expect the curve to do something like this maybe, as the really big fans have already adopted it and less kind of happy people with the brand will then probably have a lesser likelihood of converting. But anyway, let's assume that it's flat. So if I use an assumption that it's just a straight line and draw it out, I get to about 415,000 paying accounts by March 2023. That's in 2 years' time. Even if that happens, and assuming the 50% margin, we're talking about an extra profit of about 12.5 to 37.4 million pounds per year. This is still nowhere near to make the company profitable, even if their costs don't go up. And the issue is their costs have a habit of going up a lot every single year. But according to some media, that is okay. After all, the same exact Times article mentions T.S. Anil as saying that Monzo collected £200 million in funding over the last year. Now, I haven't actually seen other data showing this. I've seen lower numbers of maybe more like 120 million, but I'm not sure. Maybe I'm wrong on this one. I don't know for sure. The issue is this funding was at a 40% lower valuation of about 1.2 billion than they had to give on the previous funding round. And that meant that they gave up about 15% of the company, if you use this number that the CEO quoted, just to get this funding round. And the issue I have is that they've given up 50% of the company for funding that's barely going to make the company live for a little bit over a year. If you think about what the projection on their cost base and losses would be year on year going into this year and then going into the next year from where we are right now. Now, in last year's annual report, you can find a balance sheet of sorts on page 94. I went through and looked at all the numbers. Now, the numbers look great. There's a lot of zeros, but out of the total assets that are printed on there, 1.72 billion, 1.39 billion is customers' money. And a further 200 million is money that Monzo owes to some other people in the short term. So the actual net position, if you just subtract those two, is 129 million pounds. If you then chalk off just the really obvious things, like equipment and collateral held by third parties, which cannot be recovered unless the company realistically is going to be shutting down its operations, really, then we are left with just 92 million pounds in the bank. That's not even enough for 10 months worth of operation based on the run rate as of February 2020, if you take the average across that year and you just use the annual losses as an estimate. So that's a pretty short period of time that they had at that point. Now, Monzo has a number of funding rounds, and they have had a number of funding rounds in the past. I went and looked through history, like newspapers, stuff, and I found, so there's 3 big funding rounds in 2016, 2017, 2018, where they gave approximately, based on my estimates, maybe 9 to 10% on average in each funding round. They did 3 other rounds through crowdfunding, 2 of them on Crowdcube, I think. And in 2019, they raised £113 million against a 2 billion valuation, which was their biggest valuation. And so that's about 5.6% of the company value dropped there. Now, then there was the heavy fundraising during 2020, which cost another 16% of the company to them. So the big question for me, without knowing the specifics of those deals at all, or being privy to exactly how they diluted and dilute old shares, etc., how much more equity does Monzo actually have to do more fundraising, given that they have already given away so much of the business? Now, the obvious way to make a profit for a bank is to do lending. And in this interview, T.S. Anil said, our existing customers, I'm quoting, have something in the range of 16 to 17 billion pounds of unsecured loans not with us. I don't need to get big shares of that to drive huge amounts of good revenues for Monzo. Now, let's challenge that just a little bit. First, remember, Monzo charges an eye-watering 26.6% representative APR, and the loans only go up to £3,000. There isn't going to be a huge amount of leeway to making a lot of money there without substantial numbers of customers, and based on their previous experiences, they've actually had to reduce that maximum limit and change the proposition considerably. It looks like the early stuff that they were trying didn't really work out based on how much they've changed. In the last annual report, Monzo had 123.9 million pounds in total loans and overdrafts, and these made 18.4 million pounds in income if you look 12 pages further down in the report. But scroll another couple of pages down and you'll see in a different table that they had to book 21 million pounds out of that already that is set aside for losses. So as it stands, looking vertically, sort of looking at the business across the year in which it's reported, it is a loss-making business, that loans business. Now, as a disclosure, I am fully aware that that isn't really the long-term outcome that these loans may well generate, because there are specific rules in how IFRS governs how you go and report losses, which has changed recently. And that means you have to go and book losses in advance of them actually happening. I am aware of that. I do understand it, but I don't have any other numbers to go on because they don't talk about those numbers. They don't really share those numbers. They only really publicly like to disclose the number of customers that they have and the number of people who sign up for several different services. They don't really share the lending side data at all. In fact, in this really big interview with the Times, T.S. Anil mentioned a huge number of different numbers, but not a single number to do with the lending business. If that business was actually doing well and, generating significant revenue, which might make people feel more certain and happy about it, wouldn't you think that maybe just one mention of one of those numbers do a whole world of good to customers who are uncertain, to potential investors in the future, for just the brand and image of the company? You'd think that you'd mention something rather than kind of shirk the question and talk about the loans that your customers might have with other people. The worst thing about the lending business is that it takes a long time to actually begin generating substantial good revenue for lending business from when you first started, if you started in the right way. So even if they crack it tomorrow, even if they know the right formula and how to get customers and how to make sure that those customers are profitable, it's going to take years for that business to break even, typically based on the life cycle of how lending businesses work. This is just talking from broad experience, nothing to do with Monzo specifically. Now, the problem is those few years they have to continue making losses and living from one funding round to the next. But how many more funding rounds can a Monzo go through, given where their P&L is headed and given their relatively lackluster set of ideas that they've been coming up with over the last few years? Because I don't think a metal card that gives you travel perks is the smartest marketing move that I've seen a bank do in the middle of a pandemic. But maybe I'm wrong and maybe everyone really loves it for that. But what do I know? So what will happen when they publish the next set of results in June? How long have they got? How much more equity can they give out, and at what valuation? Will we see some kind of improvement or maybe even higher losses than they already have been showing, despite showing people very proudly in big numbers how many millions of customers the bank has in the press release? Now, here's another thought for you. In the last few months, the chief risk officer left Monzo after only being in a position for 14 months. That's relatively short for a C-level job. The last chief risk officer that they had, not actually immediately before, but a little bit before that, didn't even last that long. And the chief technical officer has also left the business recently, as did the VP of marketing. And then the CEO of himself, Tom Blomfield, he kind of renamed himself as president in the last few months. And then a few months after that, he decided to depart as well. Now, they all gave reasons, some of them health related, some of them something else, but immediately after they left, some of them actually went into other jobs, but I'm not going to go into the depths of that. The question is, does it seem odd to you that all the captains are abandoning the ship just after all of these numbers that I've just been sharing with you? Is it just a massive coincidence? Well, only time will tell. I really, really hope Monzo pull a rabbit out of the hat, because things are really not looking good from my perspective. And I am really disappointed in the media completely not picking up on this, because all I'm doing here is literally quoting their own numbers and showing what a projection of those numbers looks like. And I'm literally making no personal views on this. I really, really want them to do well. I really want there to be more competition among UK banks. I want people to have a better choice of products, but something needs to happen fast. And I feel like I'm talking about exactly the same thing that I was talking about in the summer of last year when I was making videos about Monzo. And yet, here we are.